Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very special segment today on the 21st day of July 2023. Hey, it's a beautiful day out there, 16 degrees, 2 degrees up from yesterday at this time. It was 14 degrees. Well, it's a beautiful day out there, mostly sunny today, and the winds eased a little bit. It was a little bit chilly this morning with all the winds about. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now let's get on with the news. Let's look at the top news this morning.
And there is breaking news out of Queensland where 3 people have died in a serious 3-vehicle crash on the Bruce Highway. It's happened in the small Sunshine Coast hinterland town of Federal near Noosa. A man in his 30s sustained a head injury and was transported in a serious but stable condition to Gympie Hospital.
The Matildas have defeated Ireland 1-0 in their World Cup opener despite losing captain Sam Kerr to a calf injury just hours before the game. Acting captain Steph Catley stepped up to score a penalty and give her team the win in front of a record crowd. Co-host New Zealand also grabbed their first win in the World Cup history in the opening match, securing a 1-0 win over the highly favoured Norway.
The Mayor of Alice Springs has challenged the Northern Territory government's decision to extend alcohol restrictions in Central Australia. Matt Patterson says the community wasn't consulted in the lead-up, citing alternatives to reduce crime, including tougher penalties and coordinated social services. The restrictions on takeaway alcohol and bottle shop hours will stay in place now for at least another year before they can be reviewed.
The Defence Force is expecting 2 Chinese spy ships to arrive off Australia's coast early next week to monitor large-scale military exercises which begin today. More than 30,000 personnel from 13 nations are taking part in the exercises known as Talisman Sabre.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. And moving on, alcohol restrictions, the one that we were talking about in the breaking news. Let's look at that in details.
Interim alcohol restrictions in Alice Springs now extended another 12 to 18 months.
We anticipate we'll review those measures in around a year's time.
The controls were introduced in January in response to spiking crime after federal alcohol bans lapsed across the NT. The measures include takeaway liquor bans on Mondays and Tuesdays, as well as restricted bottle shop hours and purchase limits. Health leaders say they've had a significant impact on domestic violence and assault rates in town.
We need them and they need to stay until we are confident that we don't get the same level of harm that we did in December and January.
But the opposition claims it's impacting the freedoms of responsible residents.
There has been absolutely no consultation with people in Alice Springs about these restrictions.
The extension met with mixed reviews by locals.
Should do it for another couple of years. Yeah, even longer.
It's still not doing anything at the ground level for us. For our people.
The government insists it's listening to the experts. But local leaders warn it's too soon to say just how impactful these restrictions have been. And the community will have to wait until summer to get a true picture.
We can't compare stats in July with stats from December because it doesn't work like that in Alice Springs.
I'm sure at this time of the year stats will always be down on top of summer.
Meanwhile, frontline services say more needs to be done to address the complex issues behind alcohol addiction.
We've got to invest in evidence-based early childhood. We've got to invest in quality alcohol and other treatment programs.
Continued calls for lasting change. Charmaine Allison, ABC.
So there you are, and I think it is having a good impact, but of course, for all the responsible adults, well, if you are responsible enough, you'll get your supplies during the normal hours. And I think if it's evidence-based, when you have got something to prove, then that's what it needs to go by. Well, right now, let's take a look at the yes and no vote and what's happening with the flyers. And there's so much talk about this.
Danny Eastwood believes Uluru is sacred to all Australians, so he's furious his paintings of the iconic landmark have been used in a disinformation campaign against the Voice to Parliament.
I'd like to swear, but I can't do that on television, unfortunately. It's a very low act.
ABC Investigations has discovered the altered image has been circulating on anti-voice communities on social media for the past 3 months.
And they used Aboriginal dot painting to use the word no to make it look like it was part of the painting. I was very disappointed and shocked.
We've traced the image to 2 unauthorised and anonymous flyers. One flyer being distributed around Melbourne makes false claims about the Voice, including that Australians will have to pay taxes and levies to the body. The second was made and distributed by Gold Coast activist Spencer Chalafor, who defends his claims and refuses to accept its disinformation.
Ordered 20,000 of these bad boys.
He said he had no idea about the origins of Danny Eastwood's painting when he included it on the flyer.
I do see how that could upset him. For that reason, we have decided not to use that image anymore, and we apologise to Mr Eastwood if it caused him any offence. My name's Spence.
Spencer Chalafor spent last weekend volunteering for One Nation at the Fadden by-election, but he's not a member, and the party, which opposes the Voice, says it had no hand in the flyers. He says he's been contacted by the Australian Electoral Commission, not because of the content of his flyer, but because it's not properly authorised.
I've decided that we're going to authorise everything that we do in regards to this from now on, because, I don't want to be in breach of any regulations.
The AEC can't force campaigners to tell the truth, but they're encouraging anyone trying to influence voters ahead of this year's referendum to make sure their pamphlets, posters and ads are properly authorised. Pat McGrath, ABC News.
There you are. As I mentioned, there's so much talk about that. And right now, the next news is this mastermind lady who cheated NAB out of millions, jailed for 15 years.
They were best friends. Now they're both inmates. Helen Rosamond used her event management company to falsify and inflate invoices to NAB from 2013. But it was an insider, Rosemary Rogers, who approved them while she was Chief of Staff to the CEO. The offending cost the bank up to $9 million. The length and breadth of the fraudulent activity was breathtaking in its audacity. Stunning amounts were spent on holidays for Rogers, including a European getaway for 6 people with business class flights and high-end hotels costing $159,000, and a 3-week trip to the United States for 8 people to the tune of $620,000. Rosamond charged NAB for things like a new garden worth $372,000, a $228,000 interior designer's bill, and $18,000 worth of artwork. The total benefit she gained was $4.4 million. Last year, a jury found her guilty of 90 charges, including dozens of counts of corruptly giving a benefit. Today, she was jailed for 15 years with a non-parole period of 8. The judge found Rosamond has reasonable prospects of rehabilitation, but he rejected the idea that her best friend's dominant character was the cause of her offending and said the relationship was symbiotic. Rogers is already serving a sentence of 8 years. The NAB says it failed to have proper protections in place, but it's now overhauled the way it deals with expenses. Jamie McKinnell, ABC News, Sydney.
You would think that a bank would know how better to manage their finances. Wow. And what a lot of the holidays and everything, well, right now behind bars. So, you can't get away with things like that. Well, right now, let's look at the Northern Hemisphere heat wave.
Canal control for a minute.
There's a fire emergency across southern Europe. In Croatia, Greece, and Spain. As fires sear the hills, inside the cities, this summer is merciless. From the fountains of Rome
Yeah, I drink water, like I've drink about 6 of these since morning.
To the approaches to the Acropolis. Tourists and workers alike seek relief. But this isn't merely a European crisis.
What is unusual, I would say, is the simultaneous occurrence of heat waves around the world. We've always seen a heat wave here and there during summer. What's different now is that we're seeing heat waves all around the globe at the same time. We've had a very major heat wave in South Asia a couple of weeks ago, with records being broken. We had Beijing set its all-time June temperature record with 41 degrees Celsius in just a couple of weeks ago. Just now we're having a severe heat wave in the southern US and Texas.
The hottest place on Earth this week is in California's Mojave Desert.
Hello from Death Valley National Park in America. It's 5:40 in the afternoon and 123 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cooled down already.
Abby Wines works in the Furnace Creek Visitors Centre.
It's very much like putting your head into an oven with a full fan of that heat coming towards you. So maybe more like putting your head inside a hairdryer.
Life here is unsustainable.
Oh, you can't exist outside for long periods of time when it's that hot. Our own safety policy for the National Park Service here in Death Valley National Park is that when it's above 120 degrees Fahrenheit, so above 49 degrees Celsius, we don't allow our employees to work for more than 10 minutes outside without taking the rest of the hour for a break inside a car with air conditioning.
Death Valley's rangers can't shelter all the time because the extreme temperatures attract some overheated people.
Happy Death Day to you.
It gets pretty hot in Las Vegas, but never 120. When I realized it was going to be over 120, I came out the first day.
The record high for Death Valley, 56.6 Celsius, was a century ago. But the valley is getting hotter. Abby, what is this extended heat wave doing to the debate in America about climate change?
I think it's a lot easier to believe in climate change when it's hot than when it's cold.
Scientists have calculated that just with 1 degree of global warming, we're already making extreme heat waves 5 times as frequent. So, for example, a heat wave that would have occurred once every 50 years is now occurring once every 10 years. And at the same time is being more intense. So that's how extreme heat values are being broken so easily now.
A couple of hours' drive to the east in Las Vegas, a German-Australian expert on sustainable buildings tries to stay hydrated on the city's famous strip.
At the moment we have quadrupled, we have 4 times the normal mortality rate. We have tourists yesterday collapsing on the strip because they didn't carry water.
Keeping his cool isn't easy. The University of Nevada's Stephen Lehman has been warning for decades that our cities are unprepared for heat like this.
We need to completely rethink architecture and the built environment. How do we provide continuous shade for pedestrians, but also how do we build roofs that reflect the solar radiation so the city doesn't become a baking oven, it doesn't store and trap the heat and absorb it.
Las Vegas, like Australian cities, is utterly dependent on air conditioning.
But at the moment it doesn't go below 33 degrees Celsius. It's not really cooling down enough anymore. So we have a significant urban heat island.
Stephen Lehman says there are reasonably simple ways to cool the suburbs, like white roofs that reflect the heat and extensive tree planting.
For instance, planting urban forests, urban growth with native tree species that need less water, less thirsty, but have large leaves, so they provide a lot of shade. So you have a big shadow under the crown of the tree. That's a very good way to also cool down the surface underneath. And I mean, you feel it yourself when you walk over a black asphalt car park.
These northern extremes could be mirrored this summer in Australia.
The heatwave in the Northern Hemisphere has no direct implications for us right now, but it does have a common cause. And in El Nino years, the global temperature tends to spike upwards. And so we would see more heat waves in the Northern Hemisphere. And then when our summer rolls around, tend to see more heat waves in Australia as well.
The United Nations meteorological arm says there's a 90% probability of El Nino in the second half of this year.
What it does is tends to tilt the odds towards hotter and drier. So you can think of it as loading a dice. And so we now have one face for the dice, which is effectively drier, hotter, and we still have to roll the dice so we don't get a hot, dry year every time, but it certainly increases the chances that we do.
So there you are. If you're feeling hot under the collar, as they reckon, that is the cause. So that's some insane heat out there in the Death Valley in US. Well, amazing footage there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to take a look at our functions and events before we close off this segment.
multitasking magical. This is for you both.
Girl, she got married to a boy like you. She'd kick you out if she ever knew about all the you tell me that you do. Dirty, dirty boy. You know everyone is talking on the scene. I hear them whispering about the places that you've been and how you don't know how to keep your business clean.
Namaste, hi and hello to everyone. This is Geeta Kapoor. I'm coming to Brisbane, Australia on the 22nd of September and to Melbourne on the 24th of September 2023 to witness some great talent on a wonderful platform called Australia's Great Dancers. This event is brought by Shaurya Entertainment and I can't wait to see the talent that it brings there. See you soon. Lots of love. God bless.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Hey, it's been wonderful having your company today. And until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us from this segment. We will see you then again tomorrow. And as I said before, if you have anything that you'd like to discuss on the show, more than happy to get you onto the show.